Welcome to Emblem Interviews, where I dive deep with everyday people to uncover the extraordinary within their lives, minds, and souls. Along the way, we'll often pull up their birth charts to explore what's truly happening beneath the surface. Together, we'll uncover the stories created here on Earth and examine their cosmic reflection written in the stars. Hi, my name is Cassandra Shorn. I'm going to be interviewing my sister, Felicia Chavez. She has an extensive background. I would consider her a lifelong student, but has achieved her PhD most recently in 2017 in mythology. Previous to that, she has her MBA in green business and her Bachelor of Arts, I believe, in psychology. So she's kind of always asked the big questions. And when I get on the phone with her, I feel like we could talk for hours sometimes. I love it when she comes to visit. I feel like I always eat better food and have good conversation. And I kind of just want her to stay and tell me what to do. Then I would probably be more healthy. But anyway, I would like to bring her on. Without further ado, here is Felicia. Hi.
Hi.
So good to see your face. So you recently moved to Philadelphia from Pittsburgh, but not too long in Pittsburgh, and before that, you've lived your whole life in California. About how long would you say you were in like San Rafael?
I was in San Rafael sort of on and off over a couple of decades. But I was in Marin County
Marin
from
County.
1995, more or less, with some breaks until we moved in 2022.
Okay. And that's when you first did the big change to Pittsburgh. Didn't quite love it. Although I've seen it from afar driving by. It's beautiful, but yeah, I
Hmm.
know it has some issues environmentally and whatnot. And now
I'd be happy to
settled.
talk about that.
We could get into that, but I
I'll
think,
just say briefly, we did love Pittsburgh. We loved it. It was fantastic. But it has a tagline, a most livable city. And for us, it was like an almost livable city
yeah.
because as fun as molten steel is, the coking process is very stinky and it floods the whole city a few times a week. And most people don't seem to notice. But for us, it was like,
Well, you
close
guys
the
are,
windows. It
yeah.
was a horrible experience. So
Mm.
fortunately, we couldn't stay long term,
I
sadly.
would say you and your partner Cornelius are highly sensitive people to, energies, but also smells and your environment. And there's pros and cons to that.
Oh yeah, double-edged
Yeah.
sword.
For sure. So I think we could kind of start at the beginning. I just have a few questions written down, and we can just kind of see how, where it goes. But um, I was thinking back, and I wonder, do you feel like you're, growing up in the way or in the place that we did, like in the mountains, seeing the stars all the time, because we had clear skies, we didn't have electricity, so we could see, the brilliance of the sky every night. And we lived in the mountains by a river, and we got to just kind of run free. Like, how much do you think that like influenced your passion and commitment to environmentalism and kind of going into that realm?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm a fan from a distance of this group. It's a nonprofit called Dark Sky Association,
Hmm.
and they promote the idea of basically like artistic and environmentally and physiologically healthy nighttime lighting. Um, and as opposed to bright lights that can actually cause accidents, whether you're walking or driving, bright white light at night can it sort of throws you off and it actually makes it harder to see. Whereas appropriate lighting that's pointed down to the ground as opposed to just, you know, big lights everywhere,
Hmm.
um, helps you to see and find your way and is much more pleasant to be around on the orange side of the spectrum, the red side. And as a spiritually oriented person, I do really value this experience of being able to look up and see the stars.
Yeah,
And light pollution erases that. And I know people who are professional astronomers and work in observatories, and this is sort of their thing, is like, oh, it's like it's hard to, I'm sure, do your work on a regular basis when you're fighting light pollution all the time and increasing light pollution, not to mention global warming and blah blah blah. But
the joys.
it's yeah. And like you said, it's like there's something that you get when you have the experience of growing up, when you get to go outside, A, and B, you get to see the stars on a regular basis, year after year after year. Um, and there, yeah, I do think there's something of a sense of wonder, awe, and wonder that gets instilled, that you do miss out on if you don't get that experience. Um, and yeah, I'm trying to remember the later. Oh, with regard to kind of the bigger picture, I feel like it's as much past lifey stuff that has led to my sort of path in this life as it was having, in some ways, the privilege, but also, we lived in poverty. Like, we were living in, technically, Northern California poverty. It's not like we were starving, but within the social milieu, the socioeconomic strata that our family existed in, um, we had a lot of freedom in certain ways, maybe even because of that, because of the sort of wide open spaces that we could just walk out the door and putz
I
around the
think we went
yard.
to
And
daycare a teeny bit here or there when mom and dad started that business, the window washing business.
oh,
I
right.
remember them
Hmm.
dropping us off at a daycare here and like a little bit for like maybe a couple months time. I clearly remember being there, but like other than that, I think it was a village that took care of us.
Right. Yeah, when we were old enough, we could walk, 10 minutes downtown to the store. And I mean, it was both that rural and a little bit of a village kind of setting where everybody knows everybody, for better and for worse. And
Right.
um so yeah, we definitely benefited and were challenged by that very unique environment. I mean, the river is, like, I think, a part of all of us and will be, forever, because we were right there, and just like
Mhm.
it was always there. You almost always heard it no matter where you were. And especially in the winter, and always kind of sort of fearing it a bit in the winter, the rushing, raging, all the water, and then the snow melt in the spring, and then the little bit of a fear of the bridge getting knocked out, and then a couple of times it did. And then in the summer, the great fantastic experience of swimming in the river, like every day of every summer for years, year after year
And
after
kind of
year.
like seeing how the flooding had rearranged the rocks.
Exactly. Yeah, like, is your favorite boulder you laid on last summer still there or not?
Or are there new ones to sun on or,
Yeah.
or that you have to
And
watch out for when you're
yeah,
jumping off the cliffs or whatnot? Yeah.
totally. And then you mentioned
Interesting.
also electricity. And as kids, you just kind of roll with it. And it's really only looking back where, my partner Cornelius will be like, that's a big deal that you guys grew up with either no electricity or a generator and kerosene lanterns for many years. Like, that's very different than our little 6-inch black and white TV on a car battery with the antenna in the tree that dad would turn, like, again, as children, that's just what you do. That's just what you have. It's kind of what you know. It's not like
I
you're
mean,
like,
we still saw Alf and Cheers and
totally.
some of those shows, not as clearly maybe, and not as we didn't watch it as much. But
Right.
do you? Did we get a generator like before you were like 8? Like when we still basically? I don't remember what like when we actually did. We ever get real electricity?
No, we never got real electricity. We had a real phone on and off, depending on if our parents were able to pay the bill.
Oh,
But
okay.
we didn't ever have, we had a power line on our property, but the thousands of dollars it would have cost to string it, because we had a large parcel that we were on, to string it
Yeah,
across the whole
yeah.
property was, I'm
Mhm.
sure, significant for them at the time. They did
Yeah.
put in a septic system, so we did eventually have running water and flushing toilets, but
I
we had
usually say that
outhouses
was
for a while.
around when I was like 6, maybe when we got the septic
Okay.
tank.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's around when we got it. You're 8. I do remember trucking out to the outhouse in the snow before that and just knowing that sucked. Didn't love it.
You didn't roll with that one. I
I I was like, this is not my idea of fun.
I enjoyed, I didn't love, but I kind of enjoyed, and I appreciated even a little bit at the time, doing dishes in the spring that we had
Yes.
on our property with the little spiders, the water spiders, and the water beetles. I loved that spring. I was
The
totally
spring is
fascinated by it.
was beautiful, and like all the mint that grew there, I totally clearly remember that. It's funny, like we went camping the other day, me and Jason and the girls and some of his family, and the other day, this was I think 2 summers ago.
The other year is what you meant.
We did go camping this summer, but it just rained the whole time and it was really windy. It was not fun, but 2 summers ago we went. It was beautiful, and I was washing dishes under a little spigot. And I was like, this is kind of sweet. Like the freezing cold water. I don't know. I was just like comfortable there. That's probably why.
Right,
It's like
right.
I also had the knowledge that it wasn't forever, but it was like it was a comfortable space.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I don't obviously you don't remember clearly, but you have, spoken to mom about, old times and all these memories. And um, so you were born, and then they went up to Washington? You guys went up to Washington up the river
I
and like
think
lived in a
so, for
shack
a
for a little
period of
bit?
time before they went back to the Bay Area and were there for a couple, 2 or 3 years when you were
Yeah, 'cause
born.
I was born
Mm-hmm.
in Santa Rosa, and that's when they were watching that pot farm.
Mm-hmm.
And then about 8 weeks later, whatever went down, and they had to basically flee back to the mountains.
Yeah, they had a scare of, it looked like there were people scouting out the place, and this was back in the days when this was a big deal.
Very illegal. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's what caused the kind of fleeing out of the Bay Area and back to the mountains.
Okay. Yeah, I couldn't clearly remember. And yeah, 'cause so they went back up to basically the Washington area. But I remember mom saying like they had a friend drop them way out. We were in a shack by the river, like a tiny little hut
Yes,
shack.
right before where Golden Quartz is, that
Okay.
bend where the creek comes down and meets the
Where
river.
those falls come down and meet the river.
We're more like the Iron Bridge. It was like right after the Iron Bridge.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Hmm.
I miss that area. But anyway, and then they found the property and started to buy
Well,
it or lease
after
it.
a period of time of us living in various campgrounds, we lived in both of the campgrounds in trailers before they did
And
eventually get
stayed
the
at
property.
friends'
Hmm.
houses. Yeah,
Yep.
I remember that.
By the
Okay.
grace of locals letting us stay
Yes.
with them.
I was just talking about that, how, I mean, throughout my entire upbringing, I lived with multiple friends from the time I was like a baby. Like so many friends came in and like housed us and me and Julia. Yeah, just different times. And you.
Yep.
Um, yeah, just it's really played like a really big part of
I'm still pretty comfortable in other people's houses.
it took me a while. Like, I mean, I'm so thankful, and I was at the time so thankful that my friends' parents would take me in, but I didn't really know how to interact with the families, and like, I would just try and stay out of the way, and I didn't know how to clean, so I feel like I wasn't the best guest. I would kind of try and like hide, not show up, didn't clean anything really, and later on I've come back and like just, thanked them and grown up a lot in many ways and like realized like interacting with people, showing how grateful you are and accepting their generosity is actually much more of a gift to someone who's being giving than just trying to
Right.
stay out of their way and like shrinking, but that was a lot of childhood stuff too. Just trying to be
Right.
invisible. Don't
Mm-hmm.
anger
Yeah.
anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow. Um, let's see. I did want to ask you, um, so I know you're, interested in astrology and it's like you study mass amounts of things, but what do you like incorporate astrology into your daily life, or what is your like relationship to it?
My meditation teacher, Samuel Sagan, Dr. Samuel Sagan, he was actually a medical doctor in France before he created the Clairvision School of Meditation that I've been a student of for a long time. He always encouraged us to learn what he called the language of planetary forces. So I actually, way well before I found my specific meditation school that I've been a student of for so long, I was interested in astrology. And when I did a BA in psychology, our instructor wisely suggested that we find a project for our thesis that would keep our interest for like the 3 months it would take us to do the research and the writing and, basically
Mm.
complete the whole project. And I thought to myself, what will hold my interest for 3 months? And I realized astrology was a good candidate. And so it turned out that Ian Madfis, our thesis professor, who is in the field of psychology, had a colleague, a friend who headed up an institute in Oakland, California. Um, and they arranged to let me come and look at their archival records of past patients in this medical psychological facility. And so I basically was like, hey, are there any like piles of people who've been diagnosed as schizophrenic that correlate statistically with any one of these 12 sun signs? And that was the beginning of my sort of first like grabbing and really like studying astrology. And I talked to a couple astrologers who were like, that's a stupid question. It's so simplistic. How are you going to find anything? Um, but my instructors and the person at the facility, they were very encouraging, very supportive, and my sample size was not statistically significant. It was, I think, I'd have to go back and look at, I still have the data in a box somewhere. It was like 2/3 of what it would have needed to be. But I
Mm.
did find, based on just that somewhat limited, not statistically significant sample size, that there was within that a statistically significant relationship between antisocial personality disorder as a diagnosis and Capricorns. And so totally possible that that was just a random fluke of whatever.
From
But
that, right, right.
I had
Mm.
fun writing about why that might be if it was significant,
Right,
if it wasn't just a random fluke of
right.
the data set that I happen to have access to. And so that was the beginning. And then, oh, actually, even before that, I read Linda Goodman's Sun Signs back when we were
Mm.
kids. Somehow I got a hold of that particular book that looked like a
That book
novel.
was everywhere, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, I read all kinds of things about Sagittarius that I thought were somewhat true about me and not true. And, like it said that you tend to become like religious. And I was like, that's stupid. Yeah, I had no interest in religion whatsoever. Of course, now I'm like a devotee of all religions. I think they're
Right,
fabulous.
you're
And,
extremely godly in
yeah,
ways. Interested in all things spiritual, yeah.
right, right. But then eventually, years later, becoming a student of Samuel's, we did quite a bit of work learning to feel and tune into what he called planetary forces. And so this is the book,
You
Planetary
sent that to
Forces,
me.
Alchemy and Healing. And so this is my daily astrology language. And so it is like he encouraged us to learn this language in part just to describe the world, to have an additional bit of vocabulary to describe states of consciousness primarily, but also just phenomena. And so I might describe a person as fairly sunny or having a real solar quality to them. Or I might describe a dog as very Uranian, like, like who knows why, but whatever, that dog seems like a mad scientist. Um,
There's lightning coming out of it.
yeah, yeah. And so that's kind of I've always been kind of interested to sort of do the forecasting, the looking forward, the looking at time windows, the sort of what's coming down the pike. And I've just never gotten that far. And in fact, I know very little about houses. I just know how to look at my chart and see the planetary forces talking to each other, and a little bit about how they might be talking with regard to being in a particular sign.
Mhm.
Um, but it's mostly for me about the planets, just because of my training.
I feel like maybe if one were to do another gathering of information of hmm, who, what aspects might create like or like what planets and what houses might create, not create, but lend to someone who has certain psychological dispositions. It could definitely be found there, but the way that I learn astrology or am learning, it's best to not look at a chart, try and figure out the person based on what you see. It's more like talk to the person and then look at their chart to see where it might be. Like it's kind of more like answering back if you have a question or a wonder or and then you can look at cycles, synodic cycles of the different planets, and there's progressions and all types of things that like, oh, okay, maybe they're going into this phase of life or things like that. So um yeah, I'm still developing my relationship with it, and feel like I always will be. um but I do remember being very young, reading sun signs in Cosmo or whatever magazine, teen magazine I had around, and taking it like too seriously, or like this sign is best with this sign, and like um having a crush on this sign and being like, oh no, I shouldn't like date that person because they're not a this. And actually like thinking that, and it really kind of messed up. I don't know why I was just like very open to it and like took it in, believed it, made decisions almost based on it, regretted it, and then just threw everything away. I was like, I'm not reading symbols. I'm not listening to any of this shit. I'm not so superstitious. Like I just kind of closed down because kind of like what I did with religion. I jumped into it and then was like, fuck that. I'm not doing that because I didn't like how it made me feel. And so like through teens to early 20s, I would feel like I just kind of I'm done, and I'm just going to be here and throw it all out.
Hmm.
Just, yeah. I mean, and it was probably for a reason I went that way, but it's taken me a long time to get back to symbology and like looking for signs and believing them. Because that also led me astray many times because I saw signs, I ignored them on purpose. I felt intuitive feeling. I was like, fuck that. I'm not superstitious. Nope. I'm just going to find out logically or just have to go through the experience to really know, even though it's like, not a good idea. Like, this doesn't feel right. I'm going to learn the hard way. I don't know. I just like purposefully shut down my intuition. And I've been repairing things for a long time. And
Hmm.
I'm, yeah, just very much open back up to it now. But I don't know. I've been
You
just kind of figuring that out these last few years.
you mentioned religion, that you went into it at some point. What was that, or when was that?
So when I was like sixth, seventh grade, my couple of my closest friends were very Christian, and if I stayed over on a Saturday, I'd go to church with them on Sunday, and go to like youth group, and um, I would sit for Bible study with them, like whatever, and ended up going to a couple events, and it was like, sign up here if you accept Jesus into your heart. And I was like, okay, I'm supposed to sign here, I guess. And then they took that as me like being Christian. Then I remember one of my friends sent me a Bible and mom got really pissed. She was like, no, not
Mm-hmm.
okay. Like, this is overreaching. You can learn all you want about religions, but you will not choose a religion until you're 18 and adult. And I was really glad that she did that. I was upset at the time because I actually wanted to join this other group that was this strange, you like wear these formal dresses. I don't know. It was really bizarre. I think it's called like the Rainbow Girls or something. It's like very, very ritualistic, but strange. But then I remember, yeah, just going through adolescence and starting to feel like God is watching me. Oh no, but this seems like not okay. I don't like this feeling. Like I felt judged all the time. And I was just like, this is not healthy. Like I cannot feel like this. I'm stressed out. Like I just want to be alive. And like, no, like, and I just was able to put it away and like just retract from it. And I don't know.
Mm.
I love
I
learning
wonder if
about it.
that's in your astrology chart.
Hmm, probably.
Your sort of lengthy transit of something that helped you kind of be like,
Maybe.
no, talk to the hand.
Right. That could be. I gotta look. Yeah, Saturn was going through, I'll have to look back to those years because, yeah, let's see. Now I'm curious. I did go
Mm-hmm.
back and look at the transits for when, like the tree fell on our house
Oh.
and kind of those years where we were homeless and like, um, our house got foreclosed on and stuff. Um, I was like, this has got to be a Pluto transit, and sure as shit, it was like Pluto going through the fourth and just hitting all these things. And yeah, it was just
Oh.
yeah, there it is.
Yep, death and rebirth.
Hey, just
Mm.
yeah, major upheaval and just shaking stuff up. Um, somebody's calling. I want to look at. Okay, so tell me. So you have been doing a lot of work in systems theory, and including having a whole group in Marin, where you brought in the United Nations. Um, well, tell me the exact verbiage because I'm going to mess it up.
Well, so I completed my dissertation in 2017 at Pacifica Graduate Institute, where I did a PhD in mythological studies. And in my dissertation, I wrote about the relationship between themes I had noticed over years in spiritual and religious traditions, and themes I had noticed over even a longer period of time in sustainability. Mostly the environmental bit of sustainability, but also the social justice aspects. So, basically ecological and social sustainability. And, themes like oneness or unity, or purity versus pollution, and these different themes. What did I call it? I called it like sustainability and spirituality, common threads and common threats. And I had 7 pairs of things, but I actually used some language from this book that Samuel uses of high mode and low mode. So I'd have like high mode oneness, low mode oneness. Um, and then even like high mode fracturedness and low mode fracturedness, etc. And I used systems thinking or systems theory as a sort of intellectual backbone, in a sense, to sort of stitch these things together. And happily, Fritjof Capra and Pierluigi Luisi had just published The Systems View of Life, a systems thinking textbook, one of the other books I have over here. Fantastic book, but also a lot of it was really kind of over my head because it is very sciencey and I'm not in the sciences so much. But profound. I mean, Fritjof Capra is most well known for The Tao of Physics, which he published many decades ago, and is a profound book that has been very useful to a lot of people. And Pierluigi Luisi is a biologist. And so as I finished that process and completed my graduation and dissertation, I kind of looked around again and was like, our society really needs more systems thinking. most people haven't heard of it. And some people have kind of an innate sense of it. Some people say they do and kind of don't. um, I really do think we all have an innate systemsy type way of interacting and being, but it does get kind of hammered out of us in conventional school settings and conventional job settings. It's very hierarchical, top down, linear approach to doing and being stuff and things. And so, fortunately, I had a friend who was willing to fund a little nonprofit initiative that I had and ran for 5 years, Systems Thinking Marin, systemsthinkingmarin.org, where I did basically community organizing and supported community organizers, and mostly in low-income communities in Marin County. And I ended up sort of being pulled in / glomming on to the people who were like, systems thinking, that's what we need. Come help us. And so that was, in a way, that was like a second PhD, because I studied a lot. I went to a lot of meetings. I read a lot of PDF reports about social issues, specifically in Marin County, also California and the US generally, but particularly Marin, that like nobody ever reads. You know, they're buried on these nonprofit websites or government websites or whatever. I ended up self-publishing a book, Dear Marin, which was a look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals of 2030 and how close Marin County is or isn't to meeting those, but with this whole systems thinking lens put sort of over the thing. And I did get involved with the local chapter of the United Nations Association. It's a separate nonprofit from the UN itself. It's actually existed since before the UN, because it was an advocacy group to promote the idea of creating a United Nations.
Oh, wow.
And so, fabulous, lovely group of well-meaning people just trying to promote the work of the UN, which we don't know a lot about in the US, even though it was born here and has financially, historically, had a lot of support here. With the Trump administration just being elected, who knows, last time around with Trump, there wasn't very much complete. There was like, the UN would send the bill and the administration wouldn't pay it. So who knows what's going to happen this
Not
time
paying
around.
bills? Surprise.
Well, it's dues. Each member state has dues that they owe to the United Nations for participating. And I don't know the inner workings of the United Nations itself. As part of the United Nations, we're just this like little civic group that is like cheerleaders for the United Nations. I can say that the United Nations, on the one hand, when it was born and in its time, was like phenomenal. It's like this great blossoming of this hope of, hey, people, we cannot have another world war. It was born toward the later part of World War II.
Okay.
And people were just like, this can't happen again. We have got to find a different way. And so there was this real humanitarian effort to put their heads together. And the charter was signed in San Francisco. I don't remember the exact year, but unfortunately, the way, I really would love to see governments be bastions of flexibility and innovation rather than the laggards, rather than the very picture of like the Vogons, or like just can't get it together to function. And this goes to systems thinking and the purpose. Unfortunately, the purpose of government sort of degrades over time and becomes fulfilling a function that has to do with checking boxes, which is just so boring and uninspiring. And it means that they're the last to innovate and they're super slow and totally waste, of like all kinds of resources and whatever. It would be nice if the purpose of government, again, I'm thinking of Dana Meadows and her thing about the purpose of a system. It would be nice if the purpose of government was actually really human well-being rather than checking boxes. It's like when your purpose becomes checking boxes, it's just, it kills everything and everyone, and it's very boring. Unfortunately, the United Nations has come to be like the sum total of all bureaucracies. And so we need the United Nations, and we need it to be flexible and creative and innovative, but it gets stuck, and it's just, it needs revivification, it needs care. It needs a big dose of something beautiful and like, that spirit that got it going originally. People sometimes confuse it with like a world government, which the United Nations, people who like encourage the creation of the United Nations at its inception, they had to kind of like push aside the world government people. Say like, no, that's not what we're going for. That's actually not very systemic. It's to have a world government. That's very top down, very linear, very like command and control. It just doesn't work. Whereas the United Nations is more like a bouquet. It's democratic. It's, or at least meant to be. I think the United States has had outsized influence because of the mass, because of the money, basically, is what it comes down to. And so, of course, if we don't pay our bill, who knows what's going to happen? But
Right. I mean, there's always in the back of my mind, like an organization like that probably could be extremely influential, powerful, like change so much, but wouldn't that compromise a lot of people's interests? So how has it been infiltrated or tamped down or manipulated or talked about like it's made up of like world dominators who secretly want to control everything? You can spin it and poison it however you want. So maybe having a centralized thing isn't going to work just because of the nature of humanity, but lots of little groups that can somehow coordinate, but lots of dispersed power that's not as easy to poison, uh, might be a little better way. But so.
yes, and that gets to um, you know, the corporate influence. Unfortunately, there's been laws against monopolies and this kind of consolidation, takeover, but you know,
Yeah.
the bigger they get, the more of an influence they have over the rules and regulations, until you don't really have rules and regulations and you just have these giants that lord over everything. And then these governments that are checking boxes, it's like the nature of those boxes is fundamentally colored and directed and set in motion by private interests. And it's
Mhm.
it's just, it's this whole, again, Danella Meadows and systems thinking, and the success to the successful principle in an ecosystem very much applies to human social systems as well, unfortunately. I need to turn off the heater in my room.
It's
But
so
we
funny.
can
I
continue.
was just going to turn mine on because I'm getting chilly. So
Oh,
we'll
okay.
do that. Take a pause. Yep. Okay, we're back. um, yeah, I don't know. I don't really know why I'm doing this, but I'm just like, oh yeah, I just need to do this, so I'm doing it. and it
Great.
and it's one of those things where it's kind of come naturally as far as, oh, I just found this program works and we found the time. It hasn't been this uphill battle. It's just kind of working. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going with it, flowing with it.
Great. That's fantastic.
It's a great excuse to talk to you too. um, so what tell me about, just a little bit about your current work and ultimately where you see yourself going and what you really want to do.
Well, my current job is working for the Swedenborg Foundation. Emanuel Swedenborg was an 18th century Christian mystic, part of the Western esoteric tradition, really at the heart of it, I would say, in a lot of ways. He wrote legions, just wrote and wrote, wrote. Starting in his mid 50s, he became very, very spiritual and started having visions, dreams and visions, talking to angels and the Lord,
It'd
all
be
of this.
interesting to see his chart.
Yeah, I don't know
What
if you can
transits
dig
were
one up.
those?
He was born in like 17 something or other, but and so I working in publishing. And so I always tell people, like, I get to say the words all day long, for various projects of like, do you mean divine providence or divine love and wisdom? Now, do you mean Secrets of Heaven, Volume 8? Because we're just finishing that now. It's like I just get to say these lovely things all day long because of the projects.
That's
Um, and a lot of it is really just project management. Like I'm just managing projects associated with publishing. But I am very fortunate to be in a field related to my degree, which is pretty cool. Um, and I've only been there for about just over a year now. It's what brought us to this area outside of Philly. So yeah, and I got to kind of learn about the world of Emanuel Swedenborg and Swedenborgianism, which is actually there's three different branches of churches of people who follow his works. Um, and it's
wow. That's a
just,
lot for kind of a little bit niche too.
yeah, yeah, very niche. And Swedenborgianism people coming from Europe here to Philly because Philadelphia was very much like Quakers and other sort of like religious freedom type people landed here back in the 1617, this whole William Penn thing, really kind of having this sort of utopian almost like vision of what could a society be. It's really, it's like such a paradox, this whole thing about how a lot of people were escaping oppression and then came here and committed genocide across the whole continent. I mean, it's just a weird.
I mean, can you look at the parallels that are happening right now, like with the world?
Hmm. Yep.
Just never again until we're doing it to another people. I don't want to go too into it, but it's kind of like it's a really obvious just dichotomy, or I don't know. I'm
Hmm.
confused. And it's terrifying because it's just demonstrates again how people can get caught up in a movement and a belief to the point of slaughter, and it's wild.
Well, and your the second part of your question was like, what about in the future? And
Mm.
my whole life, I've never been very good about like plotting that out. And in part that's because I'm responding slash reacting to that larger picture. Like I'm really riveted on the direction of humanity, despite the fact that I don't heavily identify with humanity for some reactionary and some not reactionary reasons. And it's just, I'm working on my level of identification with the human race. But and the reactionary part has to do with some of what you were just talking about, where it's like, what, like my personal biography has to do with thinking I would study psychology in an attempt to understand why humans were committing suicide en masse, and just not understanding that they didn't understand. Like how, what?
Like suicide, as in destroying our one and only Earth that we
Right.
absolutely rely on. Right.
Yes. Yeah, bad idea was kind of what my thought was. So why do it? And why be so stupid as to do that? Like what's wrong with us mentally in the head that we would do that? And as a teenager,
Non-logical.
that chain of reasoning made perfect sense, but it wasn't until maybe like 2 years ago when Gutierrez, who's the UN Secretary General, put this in black and white, this idea of the human race committing suicide. Like, hello, I think he was probably talking about global warming particularly, but I'm not sure. And my sort of teenage self that's still in here somewhere was heartened to see that reflected out in the world, even though it was decades later. Um,
Mhm.
because at the time, I didn't get a lot of that. At the time, I was like the one person in my high school classes who was like railing about abuse of animals and destruction of the environment and very angry about it. Um,
Mhm.
and nobody, and most other people would kind of stare at me like, oh, yeah, oh, that's terrible. Oh, gosh. So, anyways, my boyfriend, blah, blah, blah. And I thought that was so stupid. Like, how could you be concerned about this stupid guy and your hair and your stupid clothes? Like, it's just like so mad.
So you're not caught up in the human condition. You weren't anyway.
Um, in some ways, I am. But
I know.
anyway, that
Yeah.
bigger picture from a systems point of view has to do with the purpose. Humans
Mhm.
haven't really gotten clear about our purpose, and so we're kind of flailing around living out purpose the global economic systems purpose that we're all caught up in, which is, as far as we can tell, profit and growth. Although Danella Meadows points out in um, the systems view of life, no, that's the Fritjof Capra book, in Thinking in Systems, a primer, that while it looks like the purpose is profit and growth of any number of corporations in the global market economy, if you step back even further, you can see that it's control, or what she calls reducing uncertainty. It's this innate human need to reduce uncertainty. And unfortunately, we're getting more and more certain that that's a bad idea, that we're certain that we're going to crash the ship that we're on. I also worked for the Buckminster Fuller Institute for like a year and a half or so. And he had some fantastic quotes, but one of them was this whole spaceship Earth thing. And I really liked how he sort of set up this idea that he has this whole quote. I don't remember word for word, but it has to do with like converting our spin dive into oblivion into and a pulling up into turning the Earth into a universe exploring spaceship, basically. Like, we can continue to live here and have it be nice and fun, and from here explore the universe, rather than destroying where we are now and kind of being screwed, like, ugh, who wants to live in tin cans, really, actually. And so for me, I'm just kind of watching, in the future, I'd like to learn to lucid dream. I'd like to be better at astral travel. I'd like to increase my presence power. I'm a follower of Eckhart Tolle and all of his books and talks and all of this sort of a thing. So those are the things that are most important to me in terms of my cultivation. With regard to my professional life, it's like I do whatever either allows me to do those things or supports me in doing those things, or whatever and what have you, where I feel like I'm useful and I enjoy being. But and then I'm also toying with this idea of having like a mythology school online, and helping people understand their dreams and all this sort of thing. Like, I've been really into dreams forever. But and understanding symbology, that's part of what, a big huge part actually, of what drew me to the mythology program at Pacifica, was learning the language of symbols and myth and all of that. And so whatever the future looks like, it's heavily informed by dreams, lucid dreaming, astral travel, in addition to just kind of like watching this play of form and human, behavior and misbehavior, and being kind of fascinated. I personally, I have an insider view of some of the bad stuff based on past lifey stuff. And so I see things a little bit differently, I think.
So past life in your present life or past lives?
Past lives, like not
Okay.
this
So have
life.
you done some past life exploration?
Yes, however, I have to add that the past life exploration that I've done as part of my meditation school training is always, again, kind of like with astrology and learning the language of planetary forces, it's always around, not so that you can fixate on the language or the theory or the what if or whatever, or your past life and that you were this or you were that, but really so that you can understand yourself now, gain insight, open, ultimately become more present, release will that's caught up in keeping caps on things that are encapsulated because they were too painful to deal with in this life or in past lives, and that just never really were aired. And so I don't have like a chart of like the years I was incarnated and what I was doing and blah blah blah. It's more like these sort of like watercolor pictures that are painted, and at times there's like a real of something that was like, oh, and you kind of let it flow and let it move, and you get these kind of like like visions and insights, with accompanied by these emotions and feelings and vision, really. And
You're like, that just came in from somewhere very far or even a long time
yeah,
ago or something like that. Yeah. Well, I mean, and I will say, we grew up with lots of other people in the mountains under the stars, and that doesn't make someone an environmentalist, as we know. It doesn't make someone enlightened. We know many people who, turned away from themselves, and there's a lot of energy in those hills, I will say. But yeah, I mean, I do remember like you were the first one who talked about vegetarianism, and then I read the books and didn't eat meat for 17 years, and like you joined the first community group, and like, or I don't know if people reached out to you because you were such a enlightened or good student, but kind of an individual, and then you joined groups there. But then I joined them after you as well, and that like really gave me a home too and a place to create, and like added so much to my life. And so yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think dad would point out the constellations and talk about astrology, and so that probably influenced us a bit. I don't remember mom talking about it too much, but I know she is very, tuned into nature. She's just a little more quiet about it and whatnot. But I do think some of it is from them. And I would say I know I came in with some things from like that I've been very aware of from a very young age that don't really make sense to me. Maybe they are, genetic memory, or whatever that term is,
Epigenetic.
epigenetics. And I'm sure some of that's in there, some of those stressors, or um, things that I love, even. But it does seem like there are dispositions or tendencies that aren't really explained. Um, but I can find them in my chart for sure. Um, so yeah, I guess it seems like we're here to, I don't know, figure out a lot of things and kind of coalesce everything and get get as much healing in as we can. Um,
Yep.
so um, I think I will bring up your chart if you, and I'll just kind of poke around and let's see. And we'll make sure this is the right one. I had it wrong. So do you see it here?
Yes.
Okay. Is all the info right?
Let me see this.
So I have this in whole sign, an Aquarius rising. That makes tons of sense to me. um, you have had Pluto going through your 12th house, um, which the 12th house generally has to do with hidden things, unconscious, subconscious. Pluto as the planet of transformation, it brings to light that which is hidden. It makes tiny things huge, large things small, the god of the underworld. So, what's going on underneath the surface? And a lot of times, Pluto will bring us really big challenges that we have to sludge through, sometimes literally, like pipes exploding in our basement. Sometimes that has to do with Neptune Pluto interaction. But to just, huge things changing in our lives, like fundamental, like I changed religions, or I decided to leave my place of origin or my husband, or just like it, but it's usually like for a very deep reason, like because you have changed. Now I can no longer do this. So it's been traveling through your 12th house, um, of all of those things, of like, the subconscious, dream state, spirituality. But it is now about in a few days to come into your first house of self. So you might find at the end of that you are a new version of yourself. It can do that. So, and of course, we're all growing and changing and at all the time. And 17 years is a long time, but when it's in, your the house of your body and how you present to the world, it might be other people might be seeing that rather than just things that have been going on in your mind or in your soul, in your subconscious. Now it's people see it. People
Hmm.
know you have changed, like fundamentally. So
So are you
that's
saying it's been going through the 12th house for the past 17 years?
yes,
Okay.
since 2008.
Okay.
And it peaked into Aquarius last year for a few months, went back into Capricorn, and now, so Aquarians, as you know, the archetype are oftentimes, I mean, you, I feel like you can get extremes, like people who are outsiders want to do their own thing, eccentric, but they're fixed in that, so they're also, this is how I am. I'm an outsider. I see things differently and can sometimes, um, in my experience, I feel like it's my way and this is how I see it, so therefore it is. Um, Not saying you're like that, but maybe um, Pluto, like maybe when it hits your ascendant down, at 22 degrees is more where maybe you'll feel some of those fundamental changes. Um, and then we have, so Saturn rules Aquarius, and lovely Saturn has been in your second house. Um, and the second house is the house of what nourishes us: food, money, like, so how we make how we make our money that sustains us. Um, Having Pisces there, that might be kind of a watery place for you. um, but would you say that you've been learning like hard lessons around finances at all, or kind of getting more stringent about how you spend your money or how you make your money?
I would say I've been a little bit more responsible about my bank account. It's had a
Okay.
lot fewer overdrafts in the past years than in maybe the 7 years before that.
Okay, so
Um,
Saturn's working for you.
it's funny you mentioned pipes exploded in your basement. Obviously, over a period of 17 years, that could happen any number of times. But we are living in a house currently that does have a basement. We're on the second floor in a multi-flat house, and on Friday, our water heater started leaking and flooding in the basement. And so our landlady, who also lives in the same building, is now like trying to get it taken care of. We haven't had hot water, so I'm having like, we're like heating up water on the stove and carrying the pot to the tub to get our
The old
morning, like,
times.
you know, Cornelius is calling me the bath master, bath master 3000.
You're like, I got this. I
Yeah,
remember this.
yeah.
Well, we'd
So,
heat it up on the wood stove and
right.
throw it in the tub.
Yeah. And then heat up the clothes in the oven.
I clearly remember putting our clothes in the oven.
Yeah, yeah. But
It
also, I
worked.
just wanted to point out, I've taught one round, and I might be doing another round of this online systems thinking course on the Gaia Education platform, and
Okay.
about systems thinking. And I actually use astrology as an example of systems thinking, of this principle of holding the one and the many at the same time. Because, like, you're talking about Pluto, a planet, in a house. So we have now two factors, but then Pluto goes through different signs. And so now we have three factors, all kind of
Mhm.
like talking to each other. And even if you're talking about just aspects from, Pluto to the sun, or Pluto, the sun, and the moon, it's like your mental faculty or ability to perceive and interrelationship between this multiplicity of factors, like, that's a learned skill. And again, I do feel like we have it inherently, like we're wired mythologically, we're wired in terms of narrative, um, certainly with regard to just being a social mammal, but we don't necessarily actively cultivate that ability. And I do feel like astrology is one of those avenues through which people are able to learn to hold the one and the many in a different way. And they can take, I think they can take that kind of ability to be like, well, you're this is in that house and you're then is that house, but then it's talking to that's a mental, that's like gymnastics, and it's I feel like it's valuable anyway.
It's true. It gives you like this visual, beautiful structure, especially when you learn like the dignities and why they, how they chose what sign, what planet is like rules or is exalted in. It creates this beautiful, like sacred geometry basically, and it's there's just so much balance in it. It's really fascinating. I mean, and it was developed over thousands of years through different cultures and meetings of the minds. I mean, they would just sit around and talk about the shit and decide these things or live it. A lot of it, though, is observing light, the seasons. Um, what is the sun and the season doing? And therefore, this sign, this constellation that's here right now, that's what's represented. So it was, everything was lived through the observation of the sky and then documented, and then birth charts came around. I mean, learning about eclipses is pretty fascinating too.
Mm.
So yeah, there's just so much. Let's see, you were born on a disseminating moon. Oh no, not disseminating, it was the last quarter. Okay, so that can be someone who is a teacher, spreading knowledge. Um, that definitely tracks, I would say. Um, so, is there, I mean, I see, your sun in the 11th is interesting to me. That is like groups that you're involved in, how you're, the people that you're surrounded by being really where your light shines. Um, it's also conjunct almost your MC. So I feel like the way that you shine is very bright. You're a very, you're a notable person. You people remember you. Um, you're very, unique. Plus, being in Sagittarius, that also tracks a scholar, somebody who, is always learning and or teaching. With Neptune right up there, um, that makes sense too. Just with kind of expansive mindfulness, using that, the spirituality, the imagination, the beauty of life, and definitely see that. I've also been, I think I told you the other day, looking at the asteroids because I noticed like Vesta doing stuff in my chart. It's like, oh my God, it's like right there. And it's just started talking to me from there. And so it's interesting to see, you have Juno right here also in the 11th. Um, Juno is the asteroid that represents like deep commitment, is what people put Juno as. But I think we're still really learning about the details about the asteroids. And, there's the myths though. I mean, you have Ceres is, you could say the goddess of the harvest. But she also had great loss and fear when her daughter was taken. That's when Persephone was taken to the underworld by Pluto, and her journey to try and get her back. So there's just like really beautiful mythology and paths you can go down when you look at the asteroids too. The moon, we have your moon in Virgo in the 8th. That can be how you feel obligated to maybe make things right, how you feel it could represent your relationship with people and why it is kind of this dichotomy of needing it to be perfect and not really enjoying it. It's because it's an obligation. You're right with Saturn. um, Yeah, so I could see some of that being trials. And Saturn is your ascendant ruler in the eighth. Yeah, I could see that bringing up some of those the harder themes. As far as, do you have any like questions or anything like that?
Well, I am curious about my Venus because in my natal chart, it feels like it's kind of trying to be part of that cluster around the MC of like Sun, Neptune, MC, but it feels like it's a little bit distant. Like it's just kind of like, hey, I'm over here, you know. And then, however, there's also, I don't know if it's the icy or what it is, but there's something between Venus and the MC, and I can't remember what it is. But I remember when I saw it in like a minor aspects chart, I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Let's see. So what makes you curious? You're curious about your Venus because it feels kind of lonely. And then when I put in the asteroids, she's surrounded.
Yeah, yeah. And so, what is that one on this view that's between the
So
MC and Venus?
that's Ceres. So that
Oh, okay.
is, I mean, she's like, the Earth Mother, nurturer, um, and I mean, she's in a good spot. She's with your MC, and that tracks too. Your incredible work towards preserving our Earth. That makes tons of sense. And she's in the 11th house. That's the house of hopes and dreams and um, aspirations. Also helpers. So you have had strong women, helpful women come into your life and help you along the way and see your potential, I feel like. Um, Venus is in Scorpio. Scorpio is ruled by Mars, but it's more of the underbelly, um, the darker hidden forces. Um, it's
I'm a big
interesting.
fan
It's
of
your
Pluto, just FYI.
I
I'm like a Pluto
believe
person, essentially.
that. And I mean, Pluto's the modern ruler of Scorpio. They equate they're equated because god of the underworld, Scorpio. Like Scorpio is this like serious, sensual, just real energy. Like fuck everything fake. What do you mean? like,
Right.
like Scorpio risings. Um, I'm really drawn to them. Like I don't know, like I can usually pick out, I can tell if a lot of times if a male is Scorpio rising, but like my best friend is Scorpio rising. I don't know why. I think it maybe because they're so different. I'm just like la la la, it's okay. And so I'm drawn to the opposite energy of like, why are you so happy? And I'm like
Right.
curious about it. I'm like, why aren't you?
Right.
Jason has a lot of Scorpio placements too, but yeah, so it can be challenging because it's like forget about the frivolous stuff. Let's get real. I mean, you have Uranus there too, but yeah. So Venus in Scorpio is the dark sensuality, the dark lipstick. Not that you wear lipstick, but the seductress. Yeah, it's kind of like very I feel like you could equate her to with like the Lilith archetype.
Oh yeah, do
um
you have the black moon on here?
we have Lilith over here in your sixth house with Jupiter. So that's over here in Cancer. I wish you could see my cursor. I don't know how to do that yet. But so she's right by Jupiter. um
So it
so
basically at like 6, 5, 4, like 4 o'clock.
Yes, yes. So
Hmm.
7 degrees of Cancer. ruled by the moon in your house of service, day to day, kind of your everyday struggles, drudgery, illness, but also what do you work for that's hard, but you know that it's serving a higher purpose. Um, Also, Jupiter there, and Jupiter is kind of like the great organizer, um, kind of like the setup of a utopian government, the structures, but maybe not the structures, but the ideals of the structure.
Mm.
Um, and then with Lilith, she's just a rebel. Like, what are you guys doing? You're doing it all wrong. Fuck you, I'm out of here. Oh, wait, I'm in the sixth house. I'm going to try and make it better.
Right. That's funny.
And then your moon in the eighth. Okay, I have to make it better because the moon rules Cancer.
Mm. Interesting.
Um, this is kind of what I'm seeing. I did want to bring up quickly your. I guess I don't really need to bring up the current transits because I kind of know where things are. So yeah, we talked about Saturn. Saturn will be getting out of your second house soon. So hopefully that'll kind of let you breathe a little sigh of relief where things will kind of just flow a little better monetarily. Just a little less like struggle in that area or annoyance. But then Saturn will be going into your third house, which is your neighborhood, your siblings. Maybe you'll be finding a more permanent place in your neighborhood, though. Saturn can bring long term, lasting commitments. So, yeah, we'll see how it behaves in Aries. It's in its fall in Aries. Um, Also, Neptune will be moving out of your second house. So maybe more clarity when it comes to money and things like that.
I don't know
Um,
if I think I might still be seeing my natal chart. Or did you mean to show the?
no, I just still
Okay,
have your natal chart. I didn't put up the
that's fine.
transits.
Hmm.
I
I
could.
wouldn't know what I was looking at very well anyway.
Like it just makes it smaller. Um, so yeah, Neptune will be moving out of Pisces into Aries. Um, Uranus will be moving into Gemini, so maybe less upheaval in the home base situation. Oh yeah, Uranus. This full moon is conjunct Uranus. Yeah, there might be some craziness on this full moon because it's conjunct Uranus, the planet of shock and awe and like things you don't know what to expect, and then also Algol can be kind of a disruptor. We'll just say. Um, so that full moon is coming up this Friday, and then Pluto's moving into Aquarius, Saturn's moving into Aries, Neptune's moving into Aries, Uranus is moving into Gemini. So from now until like 2027, we're going through really big changes that we haven't really gone through ever. It's unusual for that many planets to be moving at the same time.
Mm.
Those like outer planets. So things will probably look different soon. Um, yeah, and we'll just have to see how it all plays out. Um, Getting Pluto out of your 12th might feel good too because it's been squaring your natal Pluto, and opposing, your sixth house. So, but then it's going into your first house. So I appreciate Pluto, but it's hard. It can be hard, and sometimes hard is not fun. But
Right. Yep.
Mars Mars going through Cancer right now as well. or no, just got into Leo. So you're about to have, okay, so Mars is going to almost get to your Mars. Oh, my moon and your Mars are really close. My moon's at 9 degrees Leo, but Mars is going to be kind of going back and forth here. So you might notice strain in your everyday, maybe some illness stuff. Mm, Try not to get in a fight with Cornelius.
I'll let him know.
Yeah, you might be feeling it as it approaches your Mars, and then it's basically stopping really soon, and then it's going to come back into your sixth, and then go back forward and move along. So, yeah, in the seventh house, you might have some relational upheaval or stuff like that, but just be nice. Don't say
Okay.
the thing.
You put that flute away for crying out loud.
Just yeah, it was in my first house. I'm Cancer rising, so when it went across my ascendant, I was like, definitely felt it in my hands, started hurting. Yeah, it was weird, annoying. Needs to move along. But anyhow, there's obviously 1,000 more things we can look at, but I should probably go.
Adjourn.
um, and as like a final note, my tray is shaking. Is there anything I would like to ask, like what you would tell your 14-year-old self? Like if you were able to give her advice.
I feel like I've done this exercise before in various contexts. I feel like I came up with something good, but now I'm forgetting what it was.
How about at
I
this
mean,
point?
it would probably be something about like asking for help from above. Like I spent a lot of time, kind of like you were mentioning about that sense of like God watching you and
Mm-hmm.
finger wagging sort of a thing. I I spent more a lot of time knowing that I was being monitored and but not really, and not knowing how to ask for help, and instead just feeling like this sucks, whatever this unpleasant situation was that I was in at the moment, and just like putting my head down and just getting through the day. So it would be something like, not it gets better, have hope for the future, or anything like that. I mean, that might be helpful, but it would be something more like, the universe is much bigger than your mind. There is help and you can ask for it. Sit and be silent for a while. Just toy around with seeing if you can not have any thoughts in your head for a while. Like it would be something spiritual, like some kind of little grain of something at an earlier age, because I had such a strong mind. I couldn't let anything in. Like it took me a couple of years in my clairvision training before I could like feel my belly, and just be like, I'm having a reaction to something, as opposed to like hours down the lane and I'm like having some big emotional fallout that like started hours before or even days before, and I just didn't let myself process it or experience it in the moment. And so I was very good at this, like, locking down stuff and meditate.
That was a survival thing as kids. We didn't want to,
Right.
kind of had to hold it in.
Yes, and I got really, really, really good at that and control. And even to this day, like it works really well. That's part of my problem, is that people do feel like they can lean on me because I'm in control and I'm not reactive. Um, but there are reactions happening. I'm just managing them in
Mhm.
this like appropriate, responsible manner.
I
And
think, I mean,
that's
that's a
a
good
trap
thing.
ultimately.
I mean, there's pros and cons. You
Yeah.
got to be able to feel the feelings, let them out, process them, acknowledge them. And there can be a time and place for that, maybe on a yoga mat when you're meditating in the morning or something. But in the moment, it can be healthy to have the feeling, but separate from it too and know what it is.
Yeah.
And I know if I get
I think
too into
something
my
about like the message could be something about being able to acknowledge what you're feeling.
Mm,
Because when you can see it and acknowledge it, that does create separation rather than just being identified with it or just really good at just, buttoning it all up and keeping it away.
yeah, I mean, I'm definitely still learning that one in ways, lot of big ways actually, but
Mm.
getting better at relating and yeah, being more comfortable and allowing myself to be instead of holding back. And
Hmm.
yeah. Okay. Well, it was very good to see you and talk to you. And I think we'll probably do this again. I'd
Totally, dude.
love to. All right.
Awesome.
I'll
Rock
talk
on.
to All
Thanks,
right.
Cass.
Love
All
you.
right. Love you.
Bye.
Bye.
Find Felicia at FeliciaChavez.com. Find me at emblemskin.com. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you would like to see more of these conversations. Have a great day.